Hello and welcome back to episode 10 of our Q&A series. Thank you very much for all your questions in these 10 episodes. I can't believe we've already done that, which is pretty incredible. And sorry for no video last week. We were super busy with the new move, setting up the new office at home and just getting things all ready, so I wasn't able to do it. But I've taken some of the questions from that and brought them over to this one, so thank you very much. And if you would like your question answered in this series, the best way to do it is leave it down in the comment section. Just type it out and we'll screenshot it and put it in the next video. You can email it us at info@kibbleWatches.co.uk, but make sure you put in the title that this is for the Q&A video, otherwise it will just get passed by or answered as a normal question. And the final way is on Tuesday on our Instagram at KibbleWatches. On our stories we put a questions box which you can type in the question. Now that does limit the amount of characters you can do, so if you have a more detailed question you'd like a lengthy answer to, please submit that at the email address. That's probably the easiest one. And if you'd like to skip to a specific question that's being answered in this video, down in the description there is each question listed with a timestamp to skip to that specific part. Now let's have a look at what's on wrist before we get into the video. I'm actually wearing a beautiful watch which is coming to the website very soon. It's an Omega Constellation from 1969 with a beautiful texture dial, 18 karat white gold bezel, and on its original bracelet as well, which just looks fantastic. Really enjoy this watch, and it's actually the Constellation that I didn't give enough attention to. I always give my attention to the pipe hand Constellation, whereas this one has really surprised me, and I've got to be honest, I actually prefer it on wrist to the pipe hand. So question one from Dave Wallace. Apologies if I'm butchering the name, you can see it on screen right there. He asks, how often should you get a watch serviced and what can you expect this to cost? Great question, something I get asked all the time, and something that people answer differently as well. I've noticed you'll hear different people in the industry say different things. Now for the most part I think there's a round ballpark figure that's given of every 4 to 6 years for a service interval. I think that's pretty safe for most watches. Some watches have longer service intervals because, like the coaxial movement in Omega, it uses less friction and also less lubrication. In some parts, no lubrication at all. So the reason a watch requires a service is after so much use, pretty much it's deteriorating the parts inside, so they need to be checked. But the most part, it's the oil. So, and the oil and grease. That oil and grease will either congeal, which means it gets all clumpy and sort of gets stuck into the movement and just affects the way the beat of the balance goes and everything like that. As you guys and girls probably know, I'm not a watchmaker, so if I'm explaining this terribly and there's a watchmaker watching, feel free to put in the comment section the exact terminology because I'm probably butchering it. But for the most part, that is the reason a watch requires a service, because that starts affecting the timekeeping, the oil start degrading, and worst case scenario, parts need replacing because they wear down. You've got to imagine a watch, for example, can beat 21,600 times per hour. Now that's 21,600 times that there is movement inside that movement, and you multiply that by years, you can see how much metal on metal is going to be hitting each other and how that's going to pay out over time. So hopefully that answers the first part. Every 4 to 6 years is what I would personally say, and a couple of watchmakers I know would also say the same. So that's that. Now in regards to the cost, again that's going to depend on a million factors. The watch movement, what it is it a basic ETA, is it something more complicated, is it a Moonphase, is it a chronograph? All these factors add up the price because it gets more complicated, and also where you're taking it. You know, you might find a watchmaker who'll do it for a lot cheaper, but there's a reason they're doing it for a lot cheaper. They might be skipping certain steps, they might not be taking the whole watch apart, they might be taking certain parts apart instead of the whole thing. So you've really got to be careful, but cost wise it can vary from a couple of £100 up to multiple £1,000s depending on the movement. So yeah, it can really vary that much. So hopefully that answers your question somewhat. But if you have a specific watch that needs a specific service, then you're going to have to get a specific quote for that. Next question from House of Hobbs. Thank you for the question. He asked, did you start on eBay? If so, how did you make the switch? So I was very fortunate. I did start on eBay, but I also didn't. So I started on eBay with purchasing for sure. That's where it all began. But I also had this YouTube channel way back from when I first started selling watches. So I actually made a video just showing what I had for sale, the same way we do this week's watches, apart from people would then email me or message me about that watch that they wanted to buy. So I was able to skip eBay for the most part, but we did use it, and we still occasionally use it to this day. Very rarely, but we do for some things, you know, stuff that doesn't quite make it to the website, that isn't quite good enough for stock, maybe stuff that needs a lot of work, and we put everything, you know, for parts or whatever like that. So we still use it, but making the switch, it was very easy for us because we had the platform already, and I've always had a website. Granted, it was never a very good website, especially in the early days. It was like it's kibbletalkswatches.webstore.com or something like that. It was a really long and boring name. So the switch was very easy because we always had it there. It was just a case of really doubling down on that, perfecting the website. We're now on our second serious website. That's what this one is, done by a very good guy called Michael at Broadbridge Design. I always butcher the name, so there you go. They do an incredible job, great SEO, great everything. You know, the design's fantastic, and it's all built on Shopify, so very organic and very easy to use from my end as a user, but also your end as a customer. It makes it very easy to purchase. So yeah, the switch was very easy for us. Would I recommend starting on eBay? I think it's a good platform, right? It has a lot of people. You've just got to be very careful. There's a lot of scams out there. There's a lot of people that are very dishonest. You know, we still buy on eBay today, and the amount of stuff we get that's not as described or completely incorrect. Because they don't put many photos, or when they do send photos, it's not very good. So there's always that risk side of it, so you just got to be aware of that. Next question from Kibsnick, my dad. Thank you for the question. He says, which features on a watch do you find the most useful? For example, Moonphase, chronograph, day, etc. I don't know a single person who actually uses the Moonphase. If you are one of those people who tracks the phases of the moon, maybe it's something to do with the tides, I don't know, let me know down in the comment section. I think that'll be quite interesting to hear what you do for a living maybe and how that correlates. But the most useful one for me is day date, for sure. I mean, it's the one I use every single day. We're always signing off invoices and things, so I'm always having to check what the day and date is. So that's the most useful for me personally. The chronograph, I think, is the nicest complication. I like the way a chronograph looks, especially if it's done well. So yeah, that's mine. I'd love to hear what your guys and girls' favourite, most useful complication is, and your favourite complication is down in the comments. Question 4 from Hairspring Watches. He asks, your current perfect 3 watch collection. Great question. And it's very difficult to narrow down to 3 watches, but if I could choose absolutely anything, I would probably go with, and again, this is tough, but I'd always have a Cartier tank of some sort. If I could have any, it would be this Cintre, a platinum one and a platinum bracelet. I've said it multiple times, so I'll put the photo up on screen. There would be that. That would be my dressy watch, but also a watch I would personally wear with t-shirt and jeans very comfortably. Then I would have a AP Royal Oak 15202. That would be my sort of more, and this sounds crazy, but more everyday watch, right? On a bracelet, very robust, it just looks good. I really like it, and it would also be a bit of a hype piece, a bit of a flex, you know, you need a watch that does that. So there'd be those two, and then the third watch, I would probably go super cliche, and I'm unsure whether I'd go vintage or modern, just depends on the Cartier tanks and trade, because I wouldn't want 2 vintage watches, both very delicate, if that makes sense. So the third watch would be a Rolex Daytona. Now, I would either go with an original pre-Daytona, so I can't remember the references off the top of my head, but like steel bezel, just absolutely gorgeous design. I've always loved those. Or I'd go very modern, and I've always really liked the Platinum Daytona. Not baguette dial, I think it's really cool with the baguettes. I know Anthony at Gentleman Timepieces, he has one of those and he absolutely rocks it. But for me, it would be the non-baguette dial, just classic. As far as platinum can be, those would be my 3 watches. No yellow metals, all stainless steel or white metals. Yeah, let me know what yours would be. Next question from CLMCHZ. Apologies for butchering that. Does it decrease the value of a watch if the bracelet is not the original, like an Omega Speedmaster? So, if a watch has an original bracelet and that original bracelet is no longer with it, it does reduce the price. Yes, granted. Now there are exceptions to this, or not exceptions, but there's sort of situations to this where it's not always expected to have it. For example, a vintage Datejust, you know, on a Jubilee band. Those Jubilee bands can be terribly warped and sort of split and everything like that. They're not particularly that great. So if that doesn't have the original band and it's on a leather strap, let's say, it doesn't massively decrease the value, but it will have an effect. Now, if you're talking a watch like an Omega Speedmaster, like a modern Speedmaster, modern reference, and the reference correlates to the bracelet model, and it doesn't have that bracelet, you're probably going to take a bigger hit because obviously you'd expect that to come with its bracelet. It's the same with box and papers and stuff like that. The box and papers will take a hit on the watch even more so if it's a newer watch, let's say 2018, 2019, and it's just watch only. It can affect it. So yes, it will decrease the value. Next question from Stan Watches. Conspiracy theory here. Do vintage dealers set the hype on watches they want to flog? Great question. I get asked it a lot. If there is a secret group chat out there where we're all talking to each other saying what watches we should make the next big thing, I'm unfortunately not invited to that, so I can't tell you if that is the case. But in regards to, I guess it depends on how you look at it, right? If you take a look at our Instagram, you could argue we are hyping the watches we sell. You could argue we're trying to hype them up because at the end of the day, we've got them for sale, and I usually almost always buy things I like. So I actually like it, and I will talk highly of the watches I have for sale. For example, this Constellation. So could you argue that that's trying to hype it up to increase prices? I mean, you could argue that, but what I'm doing is basing the price on the current market and the condition of the watch, what it comes with, and many other factors. So, do we set the hype on watches? No, I don't think so. I think you, the consumers, set the hype unknowingly. I think you look at everyone else on Instagram, and of course not everyone's like this, but people will look at what other people have on Instagram and be influenced by it, right? They will see 3 posts of the same Royal Oak and think, that looks cool, I want one, right? And that will put them looking on the market and maybe buy up one if they can, and then the price will go up because there's less out there, right? Sort of simple supply and demand, really. So I think, if anything, consumers set the hype. Has there been occasions where dealers are setting the hype via auction and things like that, bidding up things to protect their own stock? 100%. There's examples of that all the time. The most recent one where it crashed was the Hoya market. So the vintage Hoya market went on a huge hype, probably only a couple of years ago, and they were fetching silly money at auction, like ridiculous money. And oftentimes it was dealers buying these up to protect their own stock that they had bought in the previous auction at this cost. So they bought it at around the same cost to try and push the prices up, but also protect their current stock. Now, that's all well and good. If they want to do that, they can do that, right? They're entitled to do that. Where it becomes an issue is when not a single end consumer is buying that watch. There's no one actually out and about with that watch on their wrist at that price. Because then all of a sudden it's just dealers buying off dealers, and that doesn't last for long, because at the end of the day, we have to sell to an end consumer. So that's where it gets really bad, and usually the only person it will mostly affect are the dealers who are doing it. So I wouldn't worry too much as a consumer, unless you are one of the unlucky people who buys at the top of the market and it's been a propped up market and it falls down, then that can happen. But for the most part, I don't think we set the prices. I think influencers, social media and all that kind of stuff sets the prices. And the final question today, so a fairly short episode, I hope you guys don't mind, but this question is from Through Pictures. Thank you for the question. He asked, from your professional opinion, do you trust a watch from the 60s, 70s that looks completely new? Good question. So, as always, it's very difficult to answer yes or no to a question like this because it depends on so many factors, right? Do I trust a watch that, let's say, and I saw it earlier today, I got sent a photo of one and it just didn't add up. You've got to look at it as a whole package. And the watch that was sent today was a Omega Geneve with a, what they call spider dial, so a green dial. Really, really nice watches. We had a red one a while ago, absolutely stunning. I've always liked them. Now, in this situation, the dial was mint, and usually these start cracking, but it was mint, and it didn't have the same gloss that the spider dials usually have because they're like a lacquer, that's why they crack. So it didn't have that same gloss, and the lume plots were perfect. Yet the hands had developed a very serious patina, and the lume was almost missing entirely, and the bits that were left were very dark. Then the case had been over polished, but the bracelet had been brushed. So already you can see this just doesn't add up. Then the movement, there was some pitting on the inside of the case back, and the movement just looked generally quite dirty. So then you're looking at this, and as a whole package, it doesn't add up as a whole really. So you have to really ask yourself, does it all add up? And if it doesn't all add up, then it's probably not correct. As in, the hands have maybe been put on later. Maybe the bracelet was taken off a different watch and put on this case, and someone just hasn't done the thing of refinishing the whole thing to make it all look. And then there's cases where watches are completely fake. There's a lot of Seikos and Orises out there which are literally painted dials, chrome cases that have been re-chromed, and fake movements and everything. And they look brand new, and they're from the 1950s and 60s. Of course, you know, I don't trust those things. But there are cases where there's new old stock watches. We've had many in ourselves, you know, from the 1960s and 70s that have never been worn. We had a beautiful 18-karat white gold Esker a little while ago, which is gone, and that was new old stock. You know, the case was immaculate. And again, it's just about looking at everything as a whole. You've got to really look and individualize each piece and look at them independently and then look at them together, and does it add up? That's my advice. So I wouldn't say yes or no to, does a 60s, 70s watch that looks completely new, should you not trust it? I can't say yes or no to that because it depends on that specific watch. So hopefully that answers your question and gives you an insight on how to look at these watches as a whole, instead of being drawn in maybe by a mint dial. Have a look further. Is the dial mint? Okay, are the hands mint? The hands should also be mint. Ideally, if the whole thing's mint, the case should be mint. You know, all these kind of things. So ask those questions, look deeper, and look further than just the surface level. So there you have it, guys and girls. That is episode 10 of the Q&A. I look forward to seeing what your questions are in the next one. Sorry if I don't seem as lively in this episode. Didn't have a very good sleep last night, I'll be very honest, and I think my hay fever's kicking in, which absolutely sucks. And it always comes this time of the year, it makes me feel very blur. So do forgive me, and in the next video, hopefully I'll be a little bit more chipper. So we'll see you all in the next one. Keep safe, keep well out there. We're nearly at the end of lockdown, so keep well. See you all again soon. Take care.